He paid over $50,000 to traffickers to get him to America. Instead, he was kidnapped, tied up, and threatened by smugglers. A commando from the state force walks me through to a Mai Tai village on the front line.
Firing to civilians and they're burning our house.
We cross to the opposite side, held by the cookies.
When they fire, we have to retaliate.
Sky News get the full story first. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. The enthusiasm is palpable. The young desire change. These elections are a pivotal moment for the country's economic and political history. The concern here is that the public healthcare system is inadequate. In a prayer, she's asking God to help understand what happened. I cannot carry on. God, help me. He says his world has crashed. Like him, there are scores of families searching for their loved ones. Too often have families endured such tragedies for the negligence not only by the administration, but also by spiritual people in this country. Free wherever you get your news. Even though it has few seats in Parliament, Kashmir is symbolic and very significant. It's often been called a nuclear flashpoint.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
Day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Well, this is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, a reminder of our top stories this evening. President Zelensky has said missiles will speak for themselves after President Biden lifted restrictions on Ukraine using long-range American missiles to strike inside Russia. World leaders are gathering in Rio de Janeiro for the G20 summit, where the war in Ukraine is expected to be high on the agenda. And back here, police are hunting for the husband of Harshita Brella, who was found murdered in a car boot. Detectives believe Pankaj Lamba has fled the country. Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. In the next half hour then, we'll see what's making the headlines with the political journalist and broadcaster, Theo Usherwood, and the public policy correspondent of the Financial Times, Laura Hughes. Great to see both of you. Welcome to you. So let's see what's on the front pages then. The news that President Biden is to allow Ukraine to use long-range American-supplied missiles to strike inside Russia is the top story for the Financial Times. Likewise, The Telegraph, Biden gives the green light for strikes in Russia, the paper says. The international hunt for a man wanted for the murder of his wife, whose body was found in the boot of a car at Ilford in East London, leads the Daily Mirror. The Express leads with a warning from farmers that Labour's controversial inheritance tax plans from the budget is a threat to the UK's food security. The Eye reports that Keir Starmer is being urged by business leaders to get as close to the EU as possible to boost the UK economy in what's being called a Brexit reset. While The Times says the PM is also trying to forge a new relationship with China at the G20 summit in Brazil. The Guardian has been investigating Thames Water and says the company is on a knife edge trying to make £23 billion of repairs to its supply system. Meanwhile, Flush Our Gush, the Metro says hundreds, possibly thousands of toilets in new-build homes are flushing straight into rivers at peak times because of bungled plumbing, and it may have been happening for years. The Sun has news of a masked raid on the Windsor estate, close to where the Prince and Princess of Wales and his family were sleeping. And finally, The Star says contestants in I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here have been warned to watch out for hairy Aussie Yetis who might attack them. A reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you listen to our guests. So let's head straight to Theo and Laura. Welcome to both of you. Some big strategic global news to report tonight, not least in the Telegraph, which is the news that Joe Biden has finally given the green light for long-range missiles, their missiles, to be used in Ukraine, Laura.
Yeah, and this obviously comes just weeks before we know Biden is going to leave the White House and Donald Trump is going to walk into that, and that could change the shape of this policy. But for now, it is significant, and it's significant too for the UK and France, who also have these weapons, but basically rely on the Americans to use their targeting systems to use them. It's not entirely clear from reading the papers tonight whether or not the UK and France are going to be allowed to use them, if the Ukrainians can use these weapons we have provided, but obviously that would be very significant.
Yeah, the problem is everybody's in the air. The world leaders are in the air going to the G20 and we can't yet ask them, I think is the problem, isn't it?
No, so everyone's asking these questions, but we know that Keir Starmer would like them to be used. We know Macron would like them to be used. So getting this policy, this shift before Trump comes in is significant, because if you were to, well, what does that mean for UK weapons, etc.
But you've highlighted a significant part about this. It is not simply a case of saying, yes, Ukraine, go ahead. It's that the Americans need to help, and that's the difficulty, isn't it, of the ATAM system, basically?
Yes, so these are US-supplied weapons. Previously, Ukrainians had permission to use the HIMARS rockets, which have a range of 50 miles. These rockets have a range of 190 miles, which can then strike deep into Russian territory. And there had been fears in the White House that this would escalate the war between Russia and Ukraine. They put a blocker in, of course. The UK followed the lead from the Biden administration. We didn't provide those Storm Shadow missiles to Zelensky's forces. Now, of course, as Laura says, I think there'll be a question now, where do we go from here? Where does the UK go from here? And do we supply those rockets? But of course, this has caused, this will cause consternation in Donald Trump's camp. He had a phone call with Vladimir Putin, gave him assurances that he wanted to end the conflict, although he hasn't said exactly how and whether that will mean carving off part of Ukraine's territory and handing it to Putin's forces. But there's the Telegraph quote David Sachs, a close ally of Elon Musk and major donor to the Trump campaign, criticising the decision, saying President Trump won a clear mandate to end the war in Ukraine. So what does Biden do in his final 2 months in office? Massively escalate it. He wrote that on the X, the Elon Musk social media platform.
Yes, and what is interesting is what's made the decision change. Is it Trump is coming in, you've got 2 months to show what you can do with these long-range missiles. Is it these North Korean troops have gone in? And I know the Telegraph is suggesting there have been reports Pyongyang could send up to 100,000 soldiers to support Russia's invasion, which could tip the balance of the conflict. This is a seismic change, isn't it? Even if they don't enter Ukraine and they're there to retake the Kursk region, which is what seems to be happening so far.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Financial Times in their coverage of this, they very much put the image of those North Koreans in Ukraine as the kind of driving force behind Biden's change of mind here. The other interesting thing, though, to look at is how are the Russians actually going to respond? The fears over this creating an escalation. This is seen as a much more sort of invasive attack because of the distance that these missiles can impact. What is the blowback going to be to the Americans, the British, the French, etc.? And how have they balanced the risk of Putin saying that it could lead to retaliation with actually deciding just to press ahead? And yes, of course, the Americans could point to the North Koreans, and actually it's worth saying the White House, I don't think, have officially commented on this story yet. But is it also because they know that Trump has signalled he might withdraw some support that's going to Ukraine, and this is a last-bid attempt to just hold on to the legacy that Biden has because of his fears of it being unravelled slowly and potentially dangerously by Donald Trump?
Yes, and what had previously said, Putin had previously said he would view long-range missiles as direct participation in the war. Various comments tonight for example, the first deputy head of the Russian Upper House's International Affairs Committee, reported by TASS, suggesting that this would be seen as an unprecedented step which could cause a third world war. The response will be immediate and definitely a significant escalation. So that's the mood music coming from the Russians.
It is concerning, and of course, you know, Zelensky will be working closely, and his forces will be working closely with the Americans to ensure that these long-range missiles are strategically pinpointing Russian positions to support the efforts by Ukrainian troops to push back Putin's advancing forces, which the FT is reporting include around 12,000 North Korean troops. But the risk is, Anna, that if one of these missiles was to go awry and to hit a civilian target, that's not a Ukrainian weapon hitting a Russian civilian target. That's an American weapon hitting a Russian civilian target. And as you rightly pointed out, already the temperature rising amongst some of those around Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, absolutely. In the meantime, Joe Biden, we heard from him tonight. He was in Manaus, the first sitting US president to visit the Amazon rainforest, where he talked about, climate change, the need for biodiversity control and support. He didn't talk about this. He's on his way right now to Rio for the G20 summit, as is Sir Keir Starmer. And the news we've learnt tonight is that Sir Keir is expected to meet President Xi of China, which is in itself significant, is it not?
It's the first time, I think, a British Prime Minister has met their Chinese counterpart since Theresa May in 2018. And a lot of papers are covering it today, and there's mixed reaction. There are the kind of China hawks in Parliament who are feeling clearly very uncomfortable and concerned that this is going to happen because of the human rights abuses they say the Chinese government is committing. But clearly Keir Starmer has been talking to journalists on this trip with him to the G20 summit, and he's saying this is the second biggest economy in the world. We are going to engage with them. And again, this obviously comes off the back of Donald Trump signalling we're going to have big tariffs, up to 40%, the Times is saying, on Chinese imports. So what does that mean for all those imports? Where are they going to go? Are they going to come to Britain? Is that something that Keir Starmer is going to be talking about over the next week? That is something that some people might welcome in this country and others might feel incredibly uncomfortable about.
Yeah, the picture story, of course, is Donald Trump, who was at the Ultimate Fighting Championship event in New York alongside Tulsi Gabbard and Elon Musk, both of whom are in his cabinet. The fun before the hard work, you might describe that picture as, who knows? But anyway, but the Chinese meeting comes, as you said, where it seems Trump deliberately wants to get frostier with China. Well, you kind of have to work out who your friends are in the world right now, don't you? Because are nations aligning? And if so, who behind?
Look, I think from an economic growth perspective, as Keir Starmer in the Times leads with this, Britain needs a pragmatic and serious relationship with China. But, Conservatives, when they were in government, there were backbench Conservatives and indeed many members of the cabinet who are very worried about the threat posed by China. Of course, George Osborne and David Cameron gave President Xi a state visit to this country.
And a pint in a pub, I seem to remember.
And a pint in a pub and the full ceremonial honours bestowed on a head of state. And I think then there was the hawks within the Conservative Party who are much more sceptical about China seem to have the prevailing wind behind them, and you saw the concerns, particularly around Chinese companies coming in and building parts of our 5G network at going back to Theresa May's government. That scepticism with the new Labour government, seems to have waned a bit. We're hearing Rachel Reeves is due to go, the Chancellor's due to go to China next year, potentially on a trip. David Lammy's already been the Foreign Secretary. But at the same time, this isn't just about Donald Trump. China has a part to play in supporting Russia as well. Yeah. But Keir Starmer is trying to bridge, the gap and to try and secure better economic relationships, and we'll be meeting in the margins. It's not a full bilateral meeting, but there will be those who are very worried about this particular the particular way that Keir Starmer is going about it.
Yeah, and while we're on allegiances and alliances, let's go to the I, almost harking to what we heard from Andrew Bailey last week. Business bosses are saying move as close as possible to the European Union, which clearly would upset many in the Conservative Party, as we've heard for some years now, and Reform Party too.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting not to bring every story back to Donald Trump, but the last time Trump was president, the UK was still a member of the EU. Now we are not a member of the EU. That is a very, very different situation. And the UK government's going to have to think very carefully about any sort of deal they're doing with either side and the way the other one responds and reacts to that. And Donald Trump is someone who likes to do deals. And if he turns up with a menu of things he's willing to offer the UK, does that put the UK at odds with the EU, its largest trading partner? These are really uncomfortable, difficult questions that the government are going to have to deal with. And there's obviously an effort from politicians. There's some legislation going through the House of Lords, and they are trying to call for businesses to have certainty, so they know what to expect, I think, and it's particularly kind of pertinent given the climate that we're in at the moment. But, this is an argument this Brexit argument that continues to roll on, and you have these lobbies in Parliament that make these arguments, and it's an uncomfortable one for Keir Starmer, who is really desperately trying to try as much as possible, move on, have a good relationship with the EU, but not go too far.
Goodness, it's light reading for a Sunday night, isn't it? Anyway, welcome to Monday morning, everybody. Lots more still to come in the next part of our programme as well, including this in the Express, a warning that what they call Labour's war on farmers is a threat to food security in the UK. Back in just a moment.
Mayhem in the Middle East, rippling in America's West.
Get back! Get back!
The resolve of these protesters is now being seriously tested. I saw police being forced or pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
None of this is a peaceful protest.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. How are you feeling?
I am angry. It is an anti-woman agenda.
Sky News, get the full story first. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support, but it's nasty out there.
Can you beat Donald Trump, Governor? President Biden, do you trust President Xi? President Biden says that this meeting went well. He said real progress was made on a whole host of issues. Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
There's no doubt that Kamala Harris and her team are harnessing the power of social media. Do you think Kamala is brat?
Kamala's brat.
Were you scared?
Yeah, we were scared. It was terrible. Strong wind, building tearing down.
As them say, our God works, so we can't do nothing.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. Free, wherever you get your news.
Excited.
I've had severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
we've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back. You're watching the Press Preview. With me once again, political journalist and broadcaster Theo Usherwood and public policy correspondent of the Financial Times, Laura Hughes. Welcome back to both of you. Let's go to the farmers who have been protesting and will continue to do so this coming week. With the Daily Express reporting that what we're seeing with the fallout from the budget is a threat to food security, Theo.
Yes, so we're going to have a protest on Tuesday. Around 20,000 people, the Daily Express reporting, are going to descend on the capital to oppose this decision to put 20% inheritance tax on farmers. I'm not sure. I know farmers are getting very upset about this, but in the grand scheme of that budget from October the 30th, I'm not sure this is the hill that everybody's going to die on. I think the changes to the tax system for businesses will have a far greater impact. I know people, there'll be a protest, and we've got the NFU, the Farming Union, National Farmers Union, saying, well, we want to have a meeting with ministers.
We've seen it in Wales, haven't we?
We want to have a meeting with ministers, but we don't endorse, any sort of blockades in Parliament Square or Westminster. We're talking about 7 in 10 farms won't be affected by these changes. I think it's around 500 farms a year. And you're looking, actually, when you take into account the full burden, the full tax burden, you have to have a farm worth £3 million a year before you start paying this, and it's discounted, of course, on the 40% you pay in inheritance tax anyway. It's 20%, isn't it?
But the point they're making, of course, is in order to pay it off, you've got to sell land. You sell land, you're not viable. Therefore, there is an issue to food security because you aren't producing any food. And with global climate change, food security is going to become a bigger issue. And actually, we have a very efficient farming system in this country, unlike in Italy and in France, for example, where they had the benefits of the common agricultural policy.
I understand all of those. I understand all of those arguments, and yes, people will have to sell land, but people have to sell their family home when a loved one dies, don't they?
But that's the point you want. Do you not want a farming family to continue working on a farm? It's not the same as a property.
I understand, but I think you could make an argument that your mum has been in their family home all their life, and you have a particular attachment to it. But when they die, if you haven't got the liquid cash to pay the inheritance tax, you're going to have to sell that home. I understand the arguments, but I think the bigger deal for in terms of the pressures on the economy, what people up and down the country are going to be facing as a result of that budget. Interest rates are not going to fall as fast. People are going to see their mortgages, if they're looking for a fixed rate, they're going to remain probably in the 4s, if not 5% range. They're not going to come down anytime soon as a result of the budget because, of course, there are going to be inflationary pressures, as outlined by the Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, with the decision to, raise the minimum wage. And, of course, the pressures on costs of business and national insurance contributions from employers. That, I think, is where the argument against this budget is.
Well, to be fair, businesses are also protesting, though, aren't they?
I understand. Sorry, I've come out with a bit of an opinion here, haven't I? but I understand the arguments. But I think that in terms of what affects most people and how it will affect them, I think most people are going to be affected by the changes to national insurance.
It actually reminds me a bit of the whole Brexit debate when we front pages splashing on fishermen. That was such an emotive image and an argument that was used. And I think farming and British farming stirs up a lot of feelings in people. And that's why I think they have made such a kind of impact because of what it looks like and the idea of tractors descending on Westminster. It's the kind of visuals of it, whereas business organisations writing a letter to a national newspaper, it doesn't necessarily have quite the same.
Yeah, they've mobilised well, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
2 quick stories, if you don't mind, in just over a minute. First one, Laura, women's health worsens as they wait years for gynecological care, as she tries to say it.
Yeah, no, this is a really striking story. It's a kind of a huge report out, and it basically puts at the number 760,000 women waiting for non-cancer hospital care on the NHS because of gynecological issues like endometriosis, and they've got a case study here in the Times. it equates that number. It says that if all those women were stood in a line, it would stretch from London to Exeter. That is how many women are waiting on the NHS. And this is a really interesting story. It's obviously a really important story, and it sort of feeds into a lot of the issues that I write about and the kind of treatment of women's health on the NHS sometimes compared to men's health, and how women often fall behind and fall through the gaps and are living with serious, serious pain that isn't really talked about.
OK, we were going to do one more. I'm just going to show it anyway. This is the Telegraph. Tackle violent crime, not tweets. Starmer urges the police. The fallout of the Alison Pearson post-furore. Let's leave it at that. We'll do that more justice next time, I think, probably. Thank you both very much indeed, Laura and Theo. See you next time. Thank you. To the weather now. Well, a developing area of low pressure will spread north and east across the country over the next 24 hours. As well as bringing some mild, wet and windy weather to southern parts of the country, it's likely to bring a spell of snow to northern parts overnight. It'll be a cold, bright and frosty start for Scotland, northern England and Norfolk, with temperatures below 0 in rural spots. The south and southwest will be mild and breezy with outbreaks of rain. Early sunshine in the north and east will become hazy as cloud increases from the southwest. Temperatures will range from a high of 3 degrees Celsius, that's the high, in the north, to a high of 13 in the south. Rain pushing north and east will engage with the colder air through the afternoon, turning to snow over the higher grounds of Northern Ireland and the Northern Pennines. Later in the night, there's the risk of some widespread heavy snow over northern England. Wintry showers will continue over northern Scotland, with the risk of some icy stretches by morning. Sky News at 11 is next. President Biden, who's in Brazil for the G20 summit, has lifted the restriction on Ukraine, using long-range American missiles to strike deeper inside Russia.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered.